that we had understand about like what exactly the swaps is, right? In simple terms, the swap is nothing but a transaction in which two parties, or it can be more than two parties, two or more parties, agree to exchange a predetermined series of payment over a period of time, right? So it is a transaction as what we have like in options and the futures. Similarly, swap is also in a kind of in a transaction, or it can call that as an agreement between the parties. That is between the parties. It can be more than two party, right? Why is that they get into the contract? Right, they get into the contract for exchange of predetermined series of payment, right? So it is not about like payment that you're supposed to perform your role as and when the situation arises, right? When you say in the case of like what you call an options, right? If the situation is favorable, what you do, you will execute your contract. If the situation is not been unfavorable to you, right? Just a minute. Okay, it is an exchange of payments, right? So in options what we discussed, it's in like a when a situation is favorable, the call buyer or the put buyer would be executing the contracts, right? But here it is not so case, right? It is like a continuous, right? So it is in a continuously, there is nothing like one person loss or one person gain in the futures. But we have seen in the case of like future contract, what happened? Equal gain and equal losses, right? If one person make the loss, the equal amount would be the gain for the other person, right? Or vice versa, that we have seen in the case of like future, irrespective what situation is so, right? In the case of option, what happens? It is all depends upon the buyer, right? It is all upon the person who has the rights to execute. That was in the case of like options and the future. But in the case of swaps, what happened? It is not like one party is at loss and one party is a gain, right? The swap transaction is going to be designed in such a way that both the parties are going to have an equal what you say the benefit, right? It is not that one person is trying to take undue advantage over the other. It is all about like trying to cover your risk, or that the risk that you foresee that in the coming days, right? For the changes in the interest rates into the market, right? To cover such unforeseen risk in the market, right? You would like to go for a swap transaction. It is an agreement between the two parties to exchange the interest of the currency, right? What is that we exchange? What we say? A series of payment, what we say here, like what is that the series of the payment that you make, right? The series of payment what you make is either the currency, it can be between the same country, it can be the payment of currency, right? If it is a different countries, what happens? Payment of currency into the different countries, right? That is, if let's suppose you design it swap transaction between international parties, right? If the swap is an international transaction, then what happens? You basically come across with respect to currencies, that is with respect to value, or it can be like interest rates, right? So you come across different types of interest rate, like fixed interest rates, floating interest rates, right? So market interest rates you come across. So you come across different types of interest rates into the market, right? So there is the interest rate different between CRR, what we call SLR, what we call, right? So like we come across different types of interest rates with respect to RBI, with respect to banks, with respect to small medium enterprises, right? So you would like to try to exchange the interest rate between the parties, right? But one thing is you have a fixed maturity here, because all these are going to have a fixed maturity for the payment. So hence you're supposed to enter into the contract for a fixed maturity period. The base on which the cash flows are exchanged may be different, and it gives a different types of swaps, right? right? As I said, like the cash flows. The cash flows is interest rate when we call it as an interest rate swap, right? If the cash flows is a currency, then we call it as a currency swaps. Fine. So financial swaps are classified basically two types. One is interest rate swaps and the one is a currency swaps. Interest rate swaps, if the payment or exchange of cash flow is interest rate, right? Currency swaps, when the payment or the exchange of cash flow is a currency, that is a different currency, right? So get into the different currency, come across a currency swaps. Fine. What are the features of the swaps here? Right. So basically the swaps are a forward contract. We know that what is the difference between the forward contract and a future contract, right? So forward contracts are basically what we call it as a customized contract, right? So future contracts are more standardized one. So and the other difference that you find is, so you have a specific market, you have a specific exchange, you have a specific what you call as a platform for trading like NSE or BSE, right? Which is organized. When it comes to forward contract, it is not so organized and it is not so easily accessible to every individual, right? So basically the forward contracts are going to be traded over the telephonic, right? And it is purely customized. When you say customized, so if I'm entering the contract, only I will be knowing what's happening, right? The other person may not be knowing what about the contracts, about the details of the contract, right? So that's the reason swaps are called as a customized contract, because every party will have a different obligations, right? The parties here would be only the companies, the large the companies. It can be financial company, it can be the export import companies, right? It can be the banks, it can be investment banking companies. Not a normal investor, not a retail investor can participate into the swap, because he doesn't have that requirement. He may not have the requirement of the payment, right? So that's the reason forwards are called swaps are called as a forward types of contracts. Then double coincidence of the wants, right? The other feature of the swaps is a double coincidence of the want. What is coincidence? Coincidence is what is my requirement, but coincidentally that will also be your interest, right? Suppose when I say I have a loan in a fixed rate, right, and I want to convert that into the floating rate. Coincidentally, right, you have a floating rate loan and you want to convert that into the fixed rate. That is what we call as a double coincidence of the want. Fine. So that should be the matching, right? What is my loan, existing loan, should be the other party's wish to convert, right? A wish to make the payment, or the loan of the other party should be opposite. When I say I have a fixed rate loan, existing loan, the other party should have a floating rate loan, existing loan, right? And I as an individual, as a company, I have an existing fixed rate loan, I want to convert to the floating. The other party who has a existing floating rate would convert that into the fixed. This is what we call as a double coincidence of the wants, right? So swap requires the two parties with equal and opposite needs must come into the contract, must come into the contract, sorry, it is must come into the contract with each other, right? What happens, possibly every individual company may not have the same requirements. When I say I have a requirement for 1 million, the other company may have the requirement for 5 millions, right? So the requirement may not be the same. Then what happens, the swap dealer, there is an intermediary, the agent between these two parties, what he will do, he will design in such a way that it should be equal. It means, suppose my loan is I am interested for 1 million, the other person has a loan of 5 million, then he cannot swap for a 5 million, he can swap only for a 1 million, right? So that is where the other 4 million he has to look for some other party for swapping, right? So both the values of both the parties should be equal, right? And if it is not equal, it will make it as a equal. Fine. That is one the condition, that is what we call the double coincidence of the want. Fine. So next is comparative advantage. So what is this comparative advantage, right? So you might have been studied in your economics what is comparative advantage and what is the absolute advantage. right? So absolute advantage is one such in a party or a country which has advantage in both the markets, right? Such companies, what we call as such countries, what we call as an absolute advantage, right? So you go to the any market, you have a both the advantage, right? So when you say comparative advantage, you are not on par with that, but you can give the competition, right? If you look at the Chinese products, right? So Chinese has an absolute advantage in the majority of the industries, right? But you say in Indian market, we don't have an absolute advantage in all the industries like Chinese, right? But we have a comparative advantage. When you say comparative advantage, we are not able to produce as cheaper products like Chinese, but we are very near to the Chinese in terms of producing the cheaper products or the low cost products, right? That is what we call as a comparative advantage. That is what we call as a comparative advantage. Okay, just a minute. Right, so that is what we call as a comparative advantage, right? What they say is if you have an absolute advantage, no issues, right? Then if you have an at least if you don't have an absolute advantage, at least you should have a comparative advantage. Means it was say the advantage of interest rates, it means should have an accessibility for lower rate of interest rates, right? If you say the banks has been charging me high rate of interest, then you cannot say that, or you may not be get into the swap contracts, because it is not, you don't have any advantage, right? So what they say is you should have advantage. Advantage is nothing but you should have a loan at a lower rate of interest, or you can borrow the loan from the market given a chance at a lower rate of interest compared to that of the other banks, right? So now the why the banks will charge a different rate of interest to the different companies, as simple, it is all depends upon the credit rating, right? So credit rating, if you have a good credit rating, what happens, the bank will charge you less rate of interest, right? If the credit rating is lower, then what happens, because the risk is very high, then the bank may charge you the higher rate of interest rates, right? So if your credit rating is good, right, credit rating from the point of company, credit rating from the point of industry which you have been operating, or the credit rating to the country that you belong to, right, it's all depends, and the interest rate varies, fine. So that's the reason you may have the different party may have the different interest rates charged by the banks. Okay, then necessity of an intermediary, right? So here when you enter in a transaction, it is very mandatory that, or it is a must that you should have a agent, right? As you know that, because you have a party, suppose I am operating from Ballari, there if I want to find a party, I may not find how can I find a party here, right? To find a party, I had to run around in the Indian markets, who is a company, going to the press, going to the media, right? So it's a very difficult task to identify the party. Or if there is somebody who is very good party, who can access me the loan and give me the cheaper rate of interest loans, if it is available in the foreign market, that is also, there is also a possibility. So always we need to go with an agents, right? Because agents are intermediaries who has a very good what you say collect very good what you say, the network of identifying the parties, right? So they will help us in terms of arranging the swap transaction, they will help us in terms of meeting our requirement, and they will help us in terms of designing the swap very smoothly, because parties are spread across the different places, right? So it is very difficult them to pull it. So if you have an intermediary, it is a secured one. That is the reason always in a swap we have a parties or agent, they will be charging the commission from both the parties. Then there is a settlement, right? As I said, like always the swaps has a fixed maturity that is going to get settled at one day, or it will be have like every quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, the interest rates are in terms of interest rates or the currency to be made the payment. right? So when it comes to settlement, as I said, the amount should be equal. The principal amount is specified in the agreement, but no exchange of principal will take place. What happens if I say I have a loan of 1 million? I have taken previous example. So the principal amount is not been exchanged. Only what is the interest for the 1 million loan, it is going to be exchanged, not the principal value, right? So principal amount is not going to be exchanged. Only the interest on the principal amount what I have been taken the loan, it is going to be get exchanged. Then long-term agreements. Swaps are not for a short term. When you say short term for a 1 year, because identifying the party, designing the contract itself, it takes a very long time. Searching for a right person. So swaps are not useful for a short-term contract. It is useful for a long-term contract, more than 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It is more suitable for a long term because cost effectiveness would be there. Fine. Cost benefit analysis, if you look at it, is more suitable for the long term rather than for a short term, right? So swaps are long dated forward contracts which are forward, do not trade into a short period of time. Fine. Okay. Before we go on, I just posted you the video. What is that you understood about the swaps, right? What is your level of understanding? Yeah. What is your level of understanding here? Yes. What you understood here?
Company A is preferring to exchange their interest rate to floating rate.
Okay, it means what? Any company who gets into, they should be having one loan, existing loan they should be having, right? So, and they would like to convert the existing loan from one rate to the other rate, right? That is what the interest of the swap, right? What is the principle behind the swap, right? As I said, like one is a comparative advantage, other is an absolute advantage. Now let's try to understand who is having a comparative advantage and who is having an absolute advantage, right? So here there is a given details, right? What are the details? You have two companies name as company A and the company B, right? So company A having a fixed rate of interest, like it is accessible. The company A can access to a fixed rate of loan and also the floating rate of loan, right? Company A, if they want to raise the loan in fixed rate, they can raise the loan at 10%, right? The same fixed rate loan, if the company goes to the bank, the same bank, and asks that I want to raise a loan in fixed rate, the bank will be charging a 12% interest rate. Now you say why there is a difference of interest rate? As I said, like because of the credit risk and the credibility of the company, the banks will be charging the different rate of interest to the different companies, right? So now who is having the more cheaper rate of interest? Who is having the more cheaper rate of interest here? Whether the company A or the company B?
Company A, sir.
Company A is having more cheaper rate of interest than company B for the fixed rate of loan, right? Now coming to the floating rate, what is the difference between fixed rate and floating rate? As simple, the fixed rate, the rate of interest remain the fixed throughout the time frame or toward the till the date of the maturity. When it comes to floating rate, the interest rates keep changing, right? So what is the rate of interest that you're supposed to pay based on the correct rate of interest which has been prevailing into the market? Right? So that is what we call as a floating rate of interest. Floating rate is what? The rate of interest keep changing according to the market rate of interest. It is called as a floating rate, right? So fixed rate is a fixed, right? Fixed rate is the fixed, right? So floating rate, if you say, we have the PLR. PLR stands for prime lending rate, right? When you say prime lending rate, it is a rate of interest to the prime customers. Very important customers, very specific customers who are very secure rate, not a normal lending rate like what we get everybody for the investor. It is a prime lending rate. right? So what the rate of interest the bank is charging for the company A is prime lending rate, means whatever the currently the market rate of interest which has been prevailing, right? So which is everybody knows what is the market rate of interest, and it has been keep changing. Let's say the market rate of interest is 5, right? 5%, which is currently the market rate of interest, plus additionally 0.2%, right? So it is for company A. Then for the company B, for the B, the market rate of interest is 5 plus 1%, right? Again, there is a difference, right? 0.2 for company A, 1% for company B, right? So there is like interest rate, current market interest rate plus some additional interest rate you are supposed to pay based on your credit risk, right? So company A has to pay 0.2%, company B has to pay 1%. Okay, so this is about like the company A and the company B. Fine. Now you say me, which company is having more advantage in the floating rate of interest? Which rate of which company is having more what is a advantage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Company
Company
A, right? Because company A is having floating rate plus 0.2, right? Whereas company B floating rate plus 1. Now, if you look at the company A, right? Company A is having advantage in the fixed rate. Company A is having advantage in the floating rate, right? So when the company is having advantage in both the rate of interest, but still they want to get into the swap contract, they want to reduce the cost, right? Whatever the cost that they are having, they want to reduce much lesser than what they want paying now. So when the company is having advantage in both the rate of interest rates, that is in fixed as well as like floating, we call that as an absolute advantage, right? So company A is having an absolute advantage because they are having advantage in the fixed rate. The company A can raise a loan at 10%, company A can raise a loan in floating rate for prime plus 0.2, which is less, right? So such in a what we call as an absolute advantage, right? Then coming to the company B, if you look at the fixed rate of interest, the difference is how much here? 2. The quality difference, what we call here, the quality difference for the fixed rate of interest is 2%, right? Then coming for the floating rate, the quality difference is how much? 0.8. Now company B is near to company A in which rate of interest? It is not direct competitor, or they don't have an advantage, but they are very near to the company A. In which rate of interest they are very near to the company A? Company B, which is near to the company A, in which rate of interest rates?
fixed rate, sir.
Fixed
Floating
rate, the difference is 2%, ma. 10% minus 12%, the difference of interest rate between the two companies is 2%. In a floating rate, the difference is how much? Prime same, right? Then 0.2 and 1, the difference is how much? 0.8, right? So in which interest rate the company B is very closer to company A?
Floating rate, sir.
Yeah, floating rate, if you just look at the difference is only 0.8, right? It means they are not directly, they don't have a comparative advantage over that company A, but they are very near to it, right? So 0.8 is very less compared to 2%, right? 0.8% is very smaller compared to the 2%. 2% is very large difference in the interest rates, whereas 0.2 is a very small difference into the interest rate. So hence we say that company B is having a comparative advantage in the floating rate rather than saying in the fixed rate, right? So any clarification that you required here? You all agree what is absolute advantage and what is comparative advantage?
Yes, sir.
Okay, everyone is clear what is comparative advantage? But the rate of interest when you are very near, very close to the other company, right? Then such rate of interest what we call as a comparative advantage, right? This is clear, right? Absolute advantage and comparative advantage is clear now. Now As I said, like when any party enters into a swap transaction, what is that obligation? They should be having one existing loan, right? And they want to convert the existing loan to the other rate of interest. It means if the company A is having fixed, they want to convert that into floating. If they're having floating, they want to convert that into the fixed, right? That should be the major advantage, major motive of the swap transaction, right? Now, if you look at the fourth column, they have been given as a preference. Preference is nothing but floating. For company A, the preference is given floating. It means they have a loan currently. What loan they have not been specified. They want to convert that to floating. Agree? Right? Now you say me which rate of loan that they might be having. The interest is to convert that into floating, right? When the interest is to convert that into the floating, what would be the existing rate of interest loan? What would be the existing rate of interest? Whether it would be fixed or whether it would be floating. Whether the rate of interest would be fixed, whether the rate of interest would be floating.
Fixed, sir.
Yeah, fixed. So it is clear that so you can say when they are having 10%, why is that they want to get a swap? As I said, like they want to have a rate of interest much lower than the rate of interest what they have currently, right? They want to reduce from this. Clear? So when the preference is floating, when it is clear that I need to understand that the existing loan is into the fixed rate of loan, which means the company A is having fixed rate of loan. Company A is having fixed rate of loan, right, at a 10%. They want to convert that to the floating, right? If they want to convert that into the floating on its own, right? So what happens? The rate of interest would be PLR plus 0.2, right? PLR plus 0.2. But here what they want to do is they want to have a rate of interest rate much lower than PLR plus 0.2. Okay, that is only the motive of a company A. They want to reduce less than. If they go on their own, the rate of interest would be PLR plus 0.2. They want to make sure that under swap they will have a rate of interest rate which is lower than PLR plus 0.2. PLR plus 0.2. Okay, fine. Then company B, right? Company B interest is fixed. When they say company B interest is fixed, then what would be the existing loan of a company B here?
Floating.
Right? Floating, right? So company B is existingly they having a floating rate of interest rate at PLR plus 1, right? They want to convert to fixed. When they want to convert to the fixed, the rate of interest for the company, if they go individually, it would be 12%. So they want to go to a swap transaction and want to make sure that the cost of swap would be less than 12% for a company B, because they want to convert from floating to fixed. Whereas a company A want to convert for floating, existing rate is fixed, they want to convert from floating. Under a swap, we will try to show that the cost of converting from fixed to floating, it would be PLR plus 0.2 less. It would be less. It would be less than PLR plus 0.2. Okay. Okay, fine. That is about the existing loan that we'll try to show here. As I shown you here, right? So company A is having a fixed rate of loan from a bank. Company A is having a fixed rate of loan from a bank, right, at a 10%. Agree? And they want to convert that to floating. Fine. This is what the current wants. Fine. Similarly, company B, right? So company B interest is what? Floating. So company B is what is say interest is fixed, right? So that's the reason I have shown an arrow towards opposite side. That is company B. right? Fixed. So then existing loan is at a floating. Fine. So this is about like the existing obligations, right? Clear? So this is clear. Actual,
Yes,
that
sir.
has been shown as actuals, where the bank is having, company A is having a loan with the bank, right, at a fixed rate, that is at 10%, right? They want to make the payment, that is preference is nothing but they want to make a payment in the floating, right? So when they want to make a payment in the floating, right, then what happens is they will paying less than PLR plus 0.2, that is the payment. Similarly, company B having a existing loan in a floating rate, that is PLR plus 1. They are interested to make the payment in the fixed. So interest is not 12% is currently without swap. Under swap of what happens, it would be less than 12%. Fine. So that is about like uh, under swap. Now in a network diagram, this is what we need to show, a network diagram, right? So what happens here, I just showed you the left hand side part first. Company A, right, actually having the loan under what interest rate, under what interest rate the company A is having existing loan?
Fixed rate.
Fixed rate, wants to make the payment in a floating. In the red color, if you just look at, right, the red arrow which has been highlighted, that is what the company A wants to make a payment, right? What happens in a swap transaction, right? Company A is having a loan in a fixed rate, so company A will not make the payment the 10% interest rate to the fixed loan holder, right? So what happens, company A will be paying the swap. So company A will be paying a floating rate under a swap. That is floating rate, that is marked in red color to a swap dealer, right? In return, the swap dealer will make a payment to company B, right? So company A under swap, what happens, will make a payment of floating rate, which I have shown you here, right? If you just look at company A, right, so company A will convert the existing loan to the floating rate and make the payment of interest into the floating rate to the swap dealer, right? Because company A will not directly make a payment to the company B because they are far away, they are different, right? So company A will make the payment of floating rate under a swap to a swap dealer. Swap dealer will collect the floating rate from the swap person and make the payment to company B, right? So company B will pay the loan which is having existing loan in a floating rate, right? If we just look at here, the company B is having existing loan in a floating rate, right? So this rate of interest, company B is not paying. On the behalf of company B, who is making the payment here? Who is making the payment for company B existing loan existing loan? Company A is paying, right? So company A will pay to the swap dealer will pay to the company B, the company B will transfer to the bank B, which is having a floating rate of interest rate. Similarly, what happens here, the company B, which they will exchange, right, rather paying on its own the floating rate of interest to the bank, what the company B will be paying now, the company will B feels that the fixed rate of loan is more cheaper, so the company B will pay a fixed rate of loan, right, to a swap dealer which is more cheaper, right? To a swap dealer, the swap dealer will collect the fixed rate of loan from the company B and make a payment to company A. Company A will transfer that fixed rate of interest to the bank A, right? So this is how exactly the swap will flow. This is how exactly the swap will be flowing. Fine. So this is what we call as a network diagram. Network diagram, which will try to show you about like overview about the swap. Fine. If you have any doubts here, we can clarify about the doubts about like swap. Then if not, in the next class, we'll start with the problems of a swaps. Right? So any doubts that you have here about like swap, how exactly the swaps, right? So it is very difficult. Once you understand, it is very easy, right? So initially you may find some difficulty in terms of getting through the swaps, right? Once you solve the problem, right, so then it would be more easy for you to understand and work it, and it is a very compulsory problem that you will be coming across in the swap transaction, right? Any issues with this here? Any doubts
No,
that you
sir.
have here? Okay, so what I do is problem 1 of swap I'll be sharing. I think I already shared the solution, right? Swap 1 problem solution has shared you. If I not shared, what I'll be sharing to you, go through it, right? So go through and understand and come back to the class, next class, so that again you will be understanding more thoroughly. Fine. So I'll be sharing you the solution for the question 1 of the swap transaction to you all. Okay, this is fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll stop here.
Yes, sir.
Fine, thank you.